Bonus chapter. A man's honor toward women. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as a weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. 1 Peter 3 verse 7. It was late evening as my wife and I drove home from a hospital. We had just dropped off an elderly woman from our church whose husband had been admitted to the ICU. The moment had been somber. The air was thick with concern, yet something peaceful lingered. We had been there simply to serve, to show care in a time of uncertainty. But while at the hospital, we saw something that left a deeper impression than we expected. As we were leaving the hospital, two older men happened to notice our church member. Their gestures were simple, but full of quiet dignity. One gave her a warm smile and a kind word while he waited for his own wife, who was in surgery. The other gently helped her out of the golf cart that had brought us to our car in the parking garage. There was nothing flashy about what they did, just genuine care. But in that moment, their quiet respect spoke volumes. I couldn't help but notice. Something about the way they carried themselves stayed with me. It wasn't just courteous, it was gentlemanly. As we drove home, I turned to my wife and said, "Did you see how those guys were being sweet to Shirley?" I was genuinely touched by the way they treated our elderly sister from church. My wife nodded and replied, "They weren't just being sweet, they were being gentlemen." We sat in thoughtful silence for a few moments. Then she added softly, "You know, Jesus was the ultimate gentleman." Her words landed with weight. She began to explain how Christ treated women, not with pity, not with superiority, but with dignity. Whether it was a woman at the well, the woman caught in adultery, or the sisters Mary and Martha, Jesus always treated women with intentional kindness. He uplifted the broken, welcomed the outcast, listened to the overlooked, and spoke with purity and strength. Men, she said, should strive to be like that. Though I spent years in ministry, studied theology, and read about manhood, there are times when the Holy Spirit speaks more clearly through the voice of your wife than through any book or pulpit. This was one of those times. Her words stirred something in me, not guilt but conviction, not shame but direction. I knew immediately that the Lord was prompting me to write this chapter, not as an expert, but as a man still learning to walk like Jesus. This chapter is not about being polite. It's about being Christ-like. It's not about charm or chivalry for appearance's sake. It's about how Jesus treated people, especially women, with holiness, strength, and tenderness. He wasn't just a model of godliness and power and miracles. He was a perfect example of what it means to honor, respect, and elevate others through genuine love. In a culture where masculinity is often warped into domination, control, or emotional detachment, Jesus shows us something radically different. He never raised his voice to prove his authority. He never objectified, manipulated, or minimized women. He didn't treat women based on their usefulness or status. He treated them as image bearers of God, worthy of time, truth, and compassion. Being a gentleman isn't just about holding a door open or saying the right things in public. That's etiquette. What Jesus demonstrated was character. He didn't act right for appearances. He was right in his motives, tone, and presence. His gentleness wasn't weakness. It was power under control, strength wrapped in humility. He could command angels but chose to kneel and wash feet. He could speak with divine authority, yet chose to speak healing into hearts that had been broken by religion and society. This chapter is a call, not to politeness, but to purpose. It's an invitation to see manhood through the lens of Jesus. He didn't need affirmation from others to know who he was. That's why he could freely give affirmation to others, especially to women who had been dismissed or dishonored. He gave them space to speak. He gave them room to grow. He gave them grace without compromise. As we move through this chapter, you won't find a checklist of do's and don'ts. You'll find something deeper, a portrait of Jesus and how he carried himself in a world much like ours. One where women were devalued, yet he dignified them. One where power was abused, yet he stewarded it with integrity. If we're going to reflect Christ, we must carry the same spirit. So let this be more than information. Let it become revelation. Let it change how you speak, how you lead, how you touch, how you love. Not because she earned it, not because culture demands it, but because that's who he is. And if we bear his name, we must also bear his nature. Jesus is the ultimate gentleman. And in following him, we learn how to truly become men of honor. Jesus, the ultimate gentleman, there's a reason we call him the God-man. Jesus was not only fully divine, he was a perfect example of what it means to be fully human, and more specifically, what it means to be a man who leads with integrity, walks in humility, and treats others with unwavering honor. Nowhere is this more powerfully displayed than in the way Jesus treated women. In an era that dismissed, devalued, and often demeaned women, Jesus did the opposite. He dignified them. Jesus dignified women. In a culture that dismissed them, to understand how radical Jesus was, you must first understand the context of his world. In first-century Jewish society, women were often excluded from religious learning, silenced in public settings, and denied legal standing in courts. They were expected to stay in the background, present but not heard, useful but not valued. But Jesus, in both word and deed, turned that cultural norm upside down. One of the clearest examples of this is found in John 4. Jesus, traveling through Samaria, sat down at Jacob's well and struck up a conversation with a Samaritan woman. To us today, that may not seem extraordinary, but in his day, this was a cultural collision. Jews didn't associate with Samaritans. Men didn't speak publicly with women, especially not a rabbi speaking to a woman with a checkered past. Yet Jesus not only initiated the conversation, he listened to her, honored her questions, and revealed to her that he was the Messiah. She wasn't an object of ridicule. She was a recipient of revelation. Then in John 8, Jesus was confronted with another woman. This one dragged before him by religious leaders after being caught in the act of adultery. Humiliated and accused, she was moments away from being executed. But instead of joining the chorus of condemnation, Jesus silenced her accusers. "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone," he said. One by one, the stones fell to the ground. And then Jesus turned to her and said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." In one act, Jesus preserved her dignity, delivered her from shame, and called her into freedom. He didn't ignore her sin, but he refused to define her by it. Another profound moment comes in the home of Mary and Martha in Luke 10 verses 38 and 42. As Martha busied herself with the demands of hospitality, her sister Mary sat at Jesus' feet, listening to his teaching. When Martha asked Jesus to tell Mary to help, he gently rebuked her and affirmed Mary's choice. Again, this wasn't just about chores. Sitting at a rabbi's feet was a position of discipleship reserved for men. By affirming Mary's place at his feet, Jesus affirmed every woman's right to learn, grow, and be equipped as a disciple. He made it clear a woman's voice, mind, and spiritual hunger mattered to him. These weren't isolated acts of kindness. They were patterns of kingdom living. Jesus didn't just make exceptions, he made statements. He treated women as people, not problems, as disciples, not distractions. And in doing so, he showed us what it means to be a man of honor. Jesus never objectified or used women. One of the most remarkable things about Jesus was not just what he said, but what he didn't do. In a world that often used, abused, and reduced women to what they could offer men, physically, socially, or politically, Jesus stood apart. He never touched women inappropriately. He never flirted or manipulated. He never used his position to gain emotional or sexual power over them. His every interaction was marked by purity, clarity, and intentional respect. He didn't have to declare he was one of the good guys. His behavior proved it. What's more, he never minimized a woman's role. He elevated it. Women were the first to witness the resurrection and the first to carry the message. They were among his supporters, disciples, and friends. He didn't silence their stories. He sent them to tell others. He didn't relegate them to the sidelines. He brought them to the center of the narrative. This is crucial for us as men today. In a culture where women are often objectified in media, reduced to body parts, or valued only for what they can give, Jesus gives us a different blueprint. He calls us to see women through heaven's eyes, not as temptations, but as treasures, not as inferior, but as image bearers of God, not as property, but as people with purpose. He modeled strength with gentleness. Jesus was not weak. He was the strongest man who ever walked the earth. But his strength wasn't aggressive. It was redemptive. He could command angels but chose to heal lepers. He could calm seas but chose to comfort children. He had the authority to crush kingdoms but chose instead to restore broken hearts. That is strength with gentleness. And that is the mark of the ultimate gentleman. Our culture often equates masculinity with dominance, intimidation, or emotional detachment. But biblical masculinity, the kind modeled by Jesus, looks like restraint, compassion, and courage under control. True manhood doesn't need to shout to be heard. It doesn't need to control to feel secure. It doesn't need to belittle to feel powerful. Jesus walked in authority but never abused it. He led with clarity but never crushed with it. He spoke truth but always in love. He honored women not because of what they could do for him, but because of who he was. And if we are to reflect him, then we too must learn to lead with grace and carry ourselves with quiet strength. Insight. True manhood is not found in dominance, but in dignity. Jesus didn't dominate. He dignified. He didn't overpower. He uplifted. His presence brought peace, not pressure. His words brought life, not fear. And every woman who encountered him walked away knowing she was seen, valued, and safe. That's the goal, not just to be respected, but to be reflective of Christ. If you want to be a godly man, don't look to the culture. Don't imitate broken models. Look to Jesus, the true, perfect gentleman. Study how he spoke. Watch how he carried himself. Pay attention to how he protected, empowered, and honored women. Because in the end, real strength isn't proven by how much you control. It's revealed by how well you love. And love, when done right, always brings honor. What it means to be a gentleman today in a world where the definition of manhood is often distorted by culture, media, and personal wounds, the call to be a gentleman might sound outdated to some. But biblically speaking, it's anything but outdated. It's timeless. Being a gentleman is not about wearing a suit, driving a nice car, or learning how to speak eloquently. It's about how you carry yourself in private and in public, how you treat others, especially women, and whether your life reflects the character of Christ. There's a vast difference between biblical chivalry and cultural bravado. Bravado is loud, self-centered, and performative. It shows off strength for admiration, but lacks substance when tested. Chivalry, on the other hand, is rooted in humility. It's quiet strength in action. It's the willingness to put someone else first, not for recognition, but out of reverence. And Jesus modeled this perfectly. He wasn't chivalrous because he needed attention. He was chivalrous because he honored the value of others. He didn't just avoid mistreating women. He actively restored their worth. Whether it was a Samaritan woman in John 4, the woman caught in adultery in John 8, or Mary and Martha in Luke 10, Jesus approached each of them with grace, compassion, and truth. He didn't allow social customs to dictate how he treated people. He let the heart of the Father guide his actions. And that's what sets the biblical gentleman apart. He lives led by the Spirit, not by cultural expectations. So what does honor look like in practice today? First, it means listening before speaking. Too many men believe leadership equals loudness. But Jesus often asked questions, listened with intentionality, and responded with wisdom. You don't honor someone by cutting them off, talking over them, or assuming you know what they need. You honor them by truly hearing them. Second, it means protecting, not controlling. A gentleman does not use his strength to dominate. He uses it to create safety, emotional safety, physical safety, spiritual safety. If your leadership and relationship feels more like a leash than a covering, it's time to reevaluate. Protection is not about confinement. It's about peace. Third, it means serving without expecting anything in return. That's the heartbeat of agapao love. Whether it's bringing her coffee, helping with the kids, or supporting her dreams, a real man doesn't serve to score points. He serves because that's what love does. And fourth, it means speaking with dignity, not dominance. Your words should be wrapped in respect. Your tone should carry kindness, even when you're correcting. As Proverbs 31 verse 26 says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. If that's true for a godly woman, how much more should be true for a godly man? Ultimately, being a gentleman today means leading by example. As Ephesians 5 verses 25 and 28 reminds us, Husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church, sacrificially, selflessly, and sanctifyingly. Colossians 3 verse 19 echoes the same heart. Love her and do not be harsh. That means no emotional manipulation, no silent treatment, no superiority complex. It means lifting her with your words and steadying her with your presence. The truth is, honor is not just taught, it's caught. Sons learn how to treat women by watching their fathers. Daughters learn what to expect by watching how their mothers are treated. And a broken world learns what respect looks like by watching how the church behaves. That's why your role matters. That's why your gentleness carries weight. So if you're wondering how to be a gentleman in today's world, look no further than Jesus. Follow his example. Reflect his heart. Live his word. Because real men don't just build lives, they build legacies of honor. How a man treats all women reflects his heart. The true measure of a man is not how he treats the woman he's attracted to, but how he treats every woman in his life. Honor is not something that should be reserved for a romantic relationship or a wedding ring. It is a character trait that should be visible in all his interactions. A godly man doesn't flip a switch when he's interested and then turn it off when he's not. His honor is consistent because it comes from within. It's a reflection of his heart. Honor starts before marriage and outside of romance. It begins with how a man carries himself in singleness, how he engages with women in conversation, and how he respects boundaries when no one is watching. Purity isn't just about abstaining from physical sin. It's about protecting a woman's dignity with your words, your eyes, and your intentions. In dating, it looks like clarity, not confusion. Respect, not manipulation. In friendship, it's being trustworthy without ulterior motives. The man who practices honoring women before marriage is far more likely to honor his wife in marriage. One of the most dangerous habits among Christian men today is the mindset of selective honor. The idea that women must earn respect. She has to look a certain way, act a certain way, agree with you, or treat you well before she qualifies for your kindness. But that's not biblical. That's cultural pride dressed in spiritual language. The Bible doesn't tell us to honor people because they deserve it. It tells us to honor because we are honorable men. Romans 12 verse 10 says, outdo one another in showing honor. That's not a suggestion. It's a call to a higher standard. We honor not because of who she is, but because of who we are in Christ. If Jesus honored the broken, the outcast, the misunderstood, and even the undeserving, then we have no excuse to withhold that same spirit. This applies across every relationship. The way you speak to your mother reveals the temperature of your heart. The way you treat your daughter sets the tone for how she'll let others treat her. The way you speak about women in general, online, in private, in jokes, or when they're not around, shows what you truly believe. There is no on and off switch to godly honor. It must flow freely because it comes from a pure place. 1 Timothy 5 verses 1 and 2 gives clear instructions for how we are to treat women in the church. Treat older women as mothers, younger women as sisters in all purity. That verse alone eliminates casual disrespect, lustful thoughts, suggestive speech, or any attempt to play with someone's heart. Every woman is to be seen as a daughter of God, and a man of God should treat her as such. Even Jesus, when speaking about purity in Matthew 5 verse 28, called men to look beyond the physical and examine the heart. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. That's not just about avoiding sin. It's about seeing women to the eyes of heaven, not through the lens of personal gratification. So here's the challenge. Raise the standard. Honor your wife, yes, but also honor the barista, the co-worker, the single mom, the girl in your youth group, the elderly woman at your church, and the young lady you pass in the hallway. Don't lower your standards to the culture around you. Let your standard be Christ. Because at the end of the day, how you treat women says more about your heart than your words ever will. And if your heart is truly submitted to Christ, that honor will overflow to every woman you encounter. Not just the one you want to impress, but every daughter of God you are called to respect. Honor protects, builds, and reflects Christ's honor is more than politeness or public courtesy. It's a protective force, a spiritual covering that creates safety and stability for those around you. When a man walks in true biblical honor, His presence becomes a refuge, not a threat. His tone becomes life-giving, not draining. His influence builds people up, especially women, rather than tearing them down. A man's honor creates both emotional and spiritual safety. Women were never meant to live under the fear of being objectified, dismissed, or degraded. They were created to flourish, to grow in the presence of godly strength, consistency, and humility. When a man walks in honor, it relieves tension. It calms anxiety. It provides a dependable covering for daughters, wives, sisters, and friends. They don't have to brace themselves when he walks into the room. They can breathe. Why? Because a man who walks in honor has already surrendered his pride, silenced his ego, and chosen to lead like Christ. And when a man honors women, he doesn't just protect them, he builds legacy. Every moment of honor becomes a brick in the structure of your reputation. Proverbs 22 verse 1 says, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches." Your legacy isn't just about what you leave behind. It's about who you're becoming right now. Your sons are watching. Your daughters are listening. And the way you treat women teaches them what is acceptable, what is admirable, and what is godly. Legacy isn't just a family line. It's a line of example. And your example echoes further than you think. Honor builds something in others too. It reinforces worth. It encourages growth. It tells every woman, you matter, you're valuable, you're seen by God and treated accordingly by me. That message carries healing power in a culture where women are often reduced to their appearance, status, or availability. But when you carry honor, you carry the antidote to that brokenness. You carry the Spirit of Christ. That's why, ultimately, a man's honor reflects Jesus himself. Christ didn't lead through control or force. He led through love, sacrifice, and service. In Matthew 20 verses 26 and 28, Jesus told his disciples that greatness in his kingdom wasn't measured by dominance, but by servanthood. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. He followed this by washing his disciples' feet in John 13 verses 14 and 15, saying, "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Honor is servanthood in action. It's the willingness to go low so others can be lifted. It's choosing discomfort if it means someone else can feel safe. It's sacrificing personal gain to ensure others are loved well. And that's what it means to be a man after God's own heart. When you walk in honor, you protect the hearts of women. You build a reputation that lasts. And you reflect the very nature of Jesus Christ. So let this be your mission. Not to impress the world with your strength, but to honor women with your spirit. Not to seek applause, but to reflect Christ. Because the highest form of manhood is not found in achievement or applause. It's found in how well you mirror the one who gave everything to love others well. Action steps to grow in honor. It's one thing to understand what it means to honor women. It's another to live it out daily, intentionally, and consistently. Honor is not a switch we flip when it's convenient. It's a lifestyle, and like any godly virtue, it grows when it's cultivated. That's why this final section isn't just inspirational, it's transformational. It invites every man to move from conviction to action. Start with a personal inventory. Take a hard, honest look at how you treat the women in your life. Not just in public, but in private. Not just in words, but in tone. Ask yourself, am I honoring in my speech? Do I interrupt or talk over women? Do I truly listen, or do I dismiss and correct? Do I expect emotional labor without offering emotional support? These questions aren't about condemnation. They're about clarity. You can't change what you're not willing to confront. If, through that inventory, you find areas where you've fallen short, and most of us don't excuse it. Own it. Apologize. First, repent to God. Ask him to forgive the dishonor, the inconsistency, the pride, or the passivity. Then, where appropriate, apologize to the women you've hurt. A heartfelt apology can be a healing balm. It shows maturity, humility, and a desire to do better. Don't let pride rob you of the opportunity to make things right. Next, ask God to renew your heart and your vision. Ask him to give you his eyes for the women around you. Women are not objects, opponents, or obligations. They are reflections of his image. When you begin to see them as daughters of God, your posture will change. You'll protect, not possess. You'll serve, not use. You'll listen, not lecture. The transformation begins in the heart and overflows into behavior. Then take action. Start practicing daily acts of gentlemanly honor, not for show, but for growth. Open the door without expecting applause. Choose words that build, not belittle. Stand up for women in conversations where they're being degraded, even if it's just locker room talk. Be the man who chooses righteousness over relatability. These aren't small gestures. They're seeds of legacy. Over time, they create a culture around you where women feel safe, seen, and supported. Finally, surround yourself with other men who model Christ-like honor. You need brothers who will call you higher, not drag you lower. Men who don't just talk about leadership, but live it through service. Men who check their tone, discipline their thoughts, and walk in integrity. Proverb says, "He who walks with the wise grows wise." So walk with the kind of men who make you better. You were made to reflect Jesus. And Jesus was the ultimate gentleman. He honored women, defended their dignity, elevated their value, and loved them with truth and tenderness. That's your example. That's your calling. That's your standard. Let this not be just a chapter you read, but a chapter you live.